Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Booked, a place to explore the realms of creativity. Today's guest is John A. McColley. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. As we said before, or as I said before the recording, I was having a bit of a funky day, but I had this to look forward to, so it's definitely brightened my day up. So thank you. I
Nice.
appreciate you
Excellent,
being
thank
here.
you.
Ray of sunshine for the day. So, one of the main things that I know about you as a writer is that you have a huge back catalogue of things for people to read, which is fantastic. But also, how long have you been doing it? Is it like years and years and years and years and years, or are you just an overachiever?
Well, kind of a mix.
Okay.
I started really making up stories as I played by myself in my room.
Hmm.
Based on TV shows I'd been watching, Transformers and GI Joe and
Hmm.
Super Friends and things. And I'd go on my own little adventures in my head with them,
Hmm.
and so that was kind of the start of my actual writing.
Hmm.
But then later on, when I was in transitioning from grade school to junior high
Hmm.
or middle school, as some people call
Okay.
it, we went from a class of like 17, 18 kids, one classroom, one teacher all day long, to more people than I'd ever seen in one place.
Hmm.
Basically like 30 something people uh, in one class, seven different classes, seven different teachers, and the class, like literally going to the cafeteria was mind blowing because I said had never seen that many people in one place before,
Uh-huh.
and so I did not have a great time. I went from uh, you know A's and B's, getting a presidential award for my grades, to getting C's and D's and F
Hmm.
finally, and so I failed one of my English classes. I had to take a summer class, which turned out to be short story writing. It was the last
Ah.
time that class was offered in my school, as far as I know, because the teacher who taught it was his last class. He was retiring or moving somewhere else or something,
Hmm.
and so I got to, for a couple of months over the summer, go and basically spend my a couple hours, 2 3 hours every day, um, you know, talking about story and how character and description and things like that. And I would write the worst stories you've ever never hoped to read, with like zero plot, just like a guy goes into a house and there's a vampire there, or some other werewolf thing, or all these things, and they were just ridiculously bad. And like the next year, I decided to try to write a novel, and I sat down for like literally 12 hours, and I wrote like
Wow.
12 or 13,000 words or whatever
Hmm.
of a story about the guy with amnesia who started remembering what had happened to him, and it involved aliens that were basically shaped like crumpled up tissues. Or something like that, and so it was kind of always off and on. Like that kind of stuck with me, and I've remembered that story, but also the idea of putting out stories. So when I got back from college and didn't get the job I wanted, I ended up at a gas station working overnights. So I would
Hmm.
write short stories then, and
Hmm.
some of those are still around. I don't think I've published any of those ones, but it's all part of the growth. You start off doing anything, you're going to suck at it, and
Hmm.
then the more you do it, and the more you read other things, influencing you and figuring out how it's supposed to work,
Hmm.
the better you get. So I always say that I started in earnest
Hmm.
in about 2012 when I found out that I was going to be a daddy.
Oh.
My first son was coming the following year, and I was like, I've been screwing around with this for a long time. Nothing else is working out. I really want to have something published before he comes, so it is kind of a motivation for me anyway. And I
Hmm.
did. I had been doing NaNoWriMo for a few years.
Hmm.
I started in 2003, did it pretty much every year until 2023, skipping the year we had twins because that was just ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the twins came in September. The thing was supposed to be in November, and I was still up,
Hmm.
most of the night because they didn't wake up at the same time, and
Oh,
so
God.
so so get up, feed them. Oh, get up, feed the other one. Oh, get up, feed. And I learned a new kind of headache. Like obviously, I'm pretty sure it was brought on by like the chemicals that allow you to fall asleep and then wake up again, like
Mm.
just being completely depleted. And so like just a kind of headache that and I've never had it since. So I think that's probably what it was.
Uh-huh.
Um, but at any rate, I've done NaNoWriMo like 20 times, so I have 20 half novels because I write science fiction and fantasy, which usually aims at like 100,000, and NaNoWriMo was centered on doing 50,000 words in a month,
Mhm.
which is a great goal, and some people are very daunted by it, but I was, like I can do this, and I could apparently. I won the first 10 times in a row before the kids showed up. The first kid showed up,
Oh wow.
and so I have all of this practice starting stories,
Mhm.
starting longer stories, and then when Ollie was going to come, I was like, okay, focus in, and I sent out I think 36 stories in
Mhm.
2013, and I sold 12 of them, which is a pretty good
Wow.
rate.
That's a very good rate.
And then other years have come up and down again. Obviously family expanding, less
Mhm.
time to do some stuff or whatever. But I've been trying to keep going on that, and I had a friend, Ray Daly, who was doing a challenge of like sending a story out every day for a month, and
Mhm.
so we would do that like 2 or 3 times a year, and that really helped me to send things out. Like one of the
Mhm.
things we talked about before we started recording was the fact that I had this Patreon, and
Mhm.
I've been writing a book since 2017, serializing them, and none of them have been put out into the world.
Mhm.
But this year, I'm going to get into that, and the first book of both of those series will be coming out later in the year. Um,
Mhm.
I guess need or demand is how I ended up focusing myself. It's like, okay, I need to do this, make this happen before Ollie shows up, and so I started putting out stories, and I managed it, and that was very cool. And then after the kids were around, and I was like, okay, what else? What do I need to do to get my books out? And then I
Mhm.
started doing the Patreon, and making myself do a chapter a week to
Mhm.
writing, and it really helped me to focus on that. And now they're actually coming out, which is
Mhm.
very cool. And I might even finish some of the other nanos at some point.
You seem to be quite motivated by a challenge,
Yes.
from what I can hear. So there's lots of encouragement for you from like do it within this amount of time, or you've promised somebody that you're going to get a certain amount of things out, so you'll do it. Do you find that setting your own personal goals as effective is as effective as like an external challenge, or when somebody else says, "Can you do this?" you go, "Actually, yeah, I can," and do it.
More the latter, I think.
Hmm.
I try to set myself goals, but unless there's like an external factor to it, like the Patreon where people
Hmm.
are waiting for the next chapter,
Hmm.
or in case of NaNoWriMo, there was basically you could have friends
Hmm.
and that you follow each other's progress through the month and things like that. Yeah, I think the external factor is huge for me. Otherwise I just sit here and think about it the entire time, and like get to the end, I was like, oh, I didn't write any of that down, and now it's gone. Um,
Is it quite easy for you to come up with an idea because the volume in which you write is quite high compared to myself, who is like, I don't feel like it today.
I think the ideas are kind of a byproduct of doing the writing. People think of it the
Mm.
other way around. You have to have an idea before you write something. But I think, if you as long as you get started,
Mhm.
once your brain is in that mode of creating and looking at the juxtapositions of different ideas and stuff, the actual individual ideas sometimes are sparked by things like, I remember one story. I put my hand up on a stainless steel refrigerator kind of thing, and then when I pulled my hand away, I was just leaning there or whatever, talking to somebody, and I pulled it away, and I saw the shadow of my hand from like the little bit of perspiration or whatever that it
Mhm.
built up between the metal in my hand. Um, and I was like, and it gave me an idea. And so that, and sometimes it's a phrase, someone will say something just completely ridiculous, or I'll see things on social media where someone says something and then someone says something else here, and while they're nothing to do with one another and they're far
Mhm.
apart, my brain is sitting here saying, oh, that is right next to this. It's like, how would that work?
Mhm.
And I think that's my big thing for coming up with a story from that idea, is how would those things go together.
Mhm.
Like one of my NaNoWriMos that has turned into one of the books coming out this year
Mhm.
started off with the idea of how would you have, or could you even have, an advanced society with like space travel and all this other stuff that doesn't have the mastery of fire. Like they don't understand, never really got into like using combustion engines or anything like that, because didn't even have campfires or whatever. And obviously, I figured it out. It turns out that I cheated, because the the thing that comes out in the first book, and is important through the whole series, is
Mhm.
that while it looks initially like these people were, evolved here, they were born here, whatever, they weren't. And uh, they were actually from another world, and they had
Mhm.
come here on their own ship, and they had access to all this advanced technology, through the normal means. And
Mhm.
then basically they had forgotten everything
Mhm.
because of the way, part of the story, how it works.
Mhm.
And then basically there was one person who remembered and basically was feeding them all of the advanced technology stuff. So they had the means to manipulate amber and create it up into large buildings anchored by trees, so that, for stability and things. Um, but they didn't. Again, they didn't have any use for like making a campfire, because we can make food by using our nanotechnology that is already partly in our bodies and partly in this other stuff we have
Mhm.
available. So they kind of like jumped the line there. But yeah, the way I write is mostly discovery.
Mhm.
I've tried and I've tried to outline, and I did a pretty good job with one of my books out of the dozens that I've either started or finished.
Mhm.
And I wrote about half of the outline, or outline for half of the book, before NaNoWriMo started, and then I was able to write 58,000 words in
Mhm.
like 8 days.
Wow.
So when I have an outline, it's awesome. But making an outline and guessing where everything is going to go and all the twists and turns is really tough for my brain.
Mhm.
So usually I'm discovering, like the flashlight or the headlights in the fog, kind of like you can see a little bit ahead of you, and kind of choose which way to go, rather than being totally railroaded. But at the same time, you can't see anything past that. It's not like you have a full outline.
Mhm.
Um, so I think, so far as proliferation, I used to do, and I still sometimes do, uh, like structured calls where it's like, oh, I want a story about witches, or I want a story about people surviving the apocalypse or whatever,
Mhm.
and so I have all these things. In fact, there's one that meshed really well with an experience I had had. It
Mhm.
was automobilia, basically like
Mhm.
things about cars, and my wife had just had this experience. I was actually with her for the end of it,
Mhm.
um, where she had this car that she loved, and did all the repairs herself, and she had it
Mhm.
for like years and years, and then one day we were on our way to a wedding, and it just stopped. It just like
Oh.
something in the engine compartment had let loose, and then the timing belt went everywhere, and it basically
Mhm.
destroyed the engine.
Oh wow.
And so that led me to this story about a girl who something very similar happens with her car, you know, being done, and then instead of coming back and having it towed away or whatever, it was gone. And it's
Mhm.
like, where did the car go? And so that starts her voyage of figuring out where cars go when they die, kind of thing. And the editor really liked it, and my wife cried over it.
Oh.
And then it took 7.5 years for it to come out. because there was funding issues, and then some other stuff
Ah.
happened and
Mhm.
things, and it was like, oh, it'll be a few more months, it'll be a few more months, and then they just stopped saying that until
Wow.
they came out at the beginning of last year.
Mhm.
Uh, and like I joked that I'd written the story before the twins were born, and then
Mhm.
they were in second grade when it came out.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
So it's a journey, Some of these things you expect. Oh, hey, I'm gonna send a story in, and then I'll see it in a magazine in a couple of months. No, no, generally not. I mean, there are ones that have very fast turnarounds and such, but
Mhm.
and usually it's not that extreme. Usually, but it's 6 months or a
Mhm.
year before you see your story, assuming it's accepted, come out into the world.
Mhm.
And books are typically, a couple of years, at least with larger publishers. My
Mhm.
my small publisher is very fast because there's not a lot of other stuff going on. Basically, just a handful of us, which is why I can get my 5 books out this year.
So when you are, so you've already said you're a discovery writer, and that's where you feel the most comfortable. Do you still have to manage your ideas and your plot as you're going along? So you're like, right, I have to make a note that this happens because we're going to go back to it, or do you
Oh
write
yeah.
it all and then go back and then try and unpick the bits that don't work?
Oh no, I definitely try to find the chronological path through it rather
Hmm.
than trying to like jump back and forth. I've tried that with one of my nanos. I was trying to write a mystery, and I was like, oh, if I put this in here, so it's like this clue's here, that clue's there, and then I went back and started at the beginning, and so I
Hmm.
totally tangled myself up with it. Um, my only attempt to write a mystery so far. As I go, so instead of making an outline ahead of time, I make notes for each section as I write. So usually about
Hmm.
3 scenes per chapter, and
Hmm.
as also so chapter one, and then the first POV character is this person, and this is what they're doing, kind of thing. So I
Hmm.
kind of either write that part after I've actually written it, or sometimes, like I said, looking out through the fog a little bit, I can kind of plan out the next couple of scenes.
Hmm.
But I keep that so I have a record of it's like when did this happen, and I can look in my little basically after the fact outline
Hmm.
to get an idea of what happened and when. And it usually keeps me pretty straight,
Hmm.
so that I don't have to worry about you know fixing that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I also have a secondary or separate thing where I keep track of all the characters as they appear and
Hmm.
the names of places and ships and stuff like that. So it's
Okay.
like, what the hell did I call that? And then I can go to I call it my concordance, and I look it up, and it's like, okay, that person came from there, and that's yeah. This is especially important for my sci-fi. One of the things, like I said, everybody had forgotten everything. Part of what they forgot was who they were,
Hmm.
like their names and their jobs and all that fun stuff.
Hmm.
And part of the kick in the butt there is that there's one person who kind of like either woke up early or survived the forgetting
Hmm.
and has been manipulating everybody else to maintain this society the way they think it should be maintained.
Hmm.
And so basically taking away all of their uh, memories. If somebody starts remembering, or if somebody like figures something out,
Hmm.
they basically disappear and appear somewhere else with a different name and a different job, and kind of
Hmm.
thing. And so basically, I have some characters with like 5 names. So it's not just
Wow.
who is Dave again. It's he's Dave and Earl and James, and of course they're all aliens, so they have different names. But
Uh-huh.
making records of these things, keeping track of that is definitely important. And I don't know that I'd be able to write an outline for that ahead of time.
No, for
The
sure.
way all those things come up. So
Mm.
I think you end up with different material. It might be harder to edit if you're generally speaking, if you're pantsing rather than plotting,
Hmm.
because things might get tangled up or whatever. But at the same time, you end up with a very different story than the one you foresee ahead of time. Is like
Mm.
and like, oh, it's going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But then you have ideas as you're writing it. And the few times I have, aside from that one,
Mm.
have tried to outline, I always deviate from it pretty quickly.
Mm. I suppose it's more useful to like keep note of things as you're going along because then you let it. become this organic creature rather than like I think if you're writing in the realms of like fantasy or sci-fi or things that are fantastical and not of this world and not predictable, or these are very obscure scenarios, it must be incredibly difficult to actually plot it ahead of time unless you've had the vision of the whole thing at one time,
Right.
because it is potentially stuff you've never encountered before. It's wildly adapted from real life.
Oh yeah.
um yeah, I really have so much respect for people that can write fantasy and sci-fi and things that are otherworldly, because I can barely keep track of it when I'm reading it, let alone when I'm writing it. And I've seen some people with like anagrams and they have to draw like the ships and stuff so that they know what's going on, and it's like I think I would become disenfranchised with the extra work
Oh yeah.
that comes along with it. Do you like to create like graphic-y things, or like do you ever like sketch stuff or
On occasion, I do like visual things.
mm,
I do paint and draw and stuff,
mhm,
but that's usually fairly separate from my writing. The only overlap really so far has been trying to make covers for
mhm,
my books this year. I have somewhere, it's probably not right here. I have a really terrible globe that I made when I was running D&D. So
oh,
like 97, 1997. I had a coworker said, "You've
mhm,
played D&D, right?" And so, yeah, can you run us a game? It's like, guess so. I'd never done it before, but
mhm,
and that spawned this whole world, Somnron, I call it. And it, I had a plot that I came up with, and
mhm,
kind of followed it with them for years. And then I
mm,
ran that game again for another set of friends from college for a few years, um, and so it's pretty well solidified in my mind. But then I made a globe, like I said.
mhm,
I tried to GeoCities make a website for myself back in the day for that, and luckily I was able to grab those pages. I actually have them stored away.
mhm,
With my experience from running D&D, I like do maps, and sometimes I'll come up with like handouts and stuff like that. But so far as like drawing my own characters
mhm,
and stuff like that, not usually. I mean, I have a fair idea of what they look like, but not solid. I
mhm,
think that's a good position. If you get overly obsessed or not necessarily obsessed, but like overly focused on my character looks exactly like this. Their nose is 2 centimeters wide,
mhm,
and their eyes are whatever apart or whatever. Then you're taking some of the connection of the from the reader away. If you
mm,
give someone a decent idea of what someone looks like, oh, they have this color skin or they're this tall or whatever.
mhm,
Usually I do two or three kind of characteristics like that,
mhm,
and then let the reader just kind of make it up. What the rest of it is in their mind,
mhm,
which again is partly pacing. No one wants to sit there and read 3 pages of what this person exactly looks like.
mhm,
Like they can identify them on the street, kind of thing, or the same thing. It's one of the complaints people have for Tolkien, actually.
mm,
Even though everybody loves him and he's been in the zeitgeist for decades and decades, one
mhm,
of the things is, oh, he can go on for a page and a half describing a room that you walked into.
mhm.
It's kind of cool because you can completely immerse yourself in the space, but at the same time there's no story happening then. You're just like waiting for something to happen.
I suppose it depends on the reader though, because there are some people that can't make the pictures in their head, so they need to be told exactly what's going on for context. But
That's true. That's true.
there's going to be a reader for everything. This is my firm belief, and I will never change my mind. There has got to be at least one person that likes something that everybody's written. There's got to be one. Statistically speaking, there's no way that everybody would not like it.
I think there's some internet rule about that. Any subject you can think of that someone will be interested in.
It's not the rule of it's like 50 something. I don't know. It's got a
Yeah.
number,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's like
There's a bunch.
yeah. I'm pretty sure that's a porn thing, isn't it?
Well, there is that one too. I'm
Oh,
not
that's the one
sure.
I was thinking
I
of.
thought about it as I was saying it. It was like, is this
Different things.
hopefully different thing?
Yes. Don't Google it, guys. It won't make you happy. Or it might. I don't know.
It
There's
might.
something for
Yeah.
everybody. Oh, God. I'm going to change the subject before it goes down a black hole. So So, do you use a specific computery program to write, or do you prefer pen and paper, or do you have some weird thing that I've never heard of?
Well, I use mostly LibreOffice, which is basically just a Word clone.
Mhm.
I do have it's also a Scrivener.
Mm,
I just can change computers, so it's actually not logged in. I have to figure out
that's
how to.
okay.
But and I've tried it. People have sworn by it, and I've tried it a few times. I wrote one book in it, which actually was the first book I published last year.
Hmm.
And then I've tried to like move things into it to see if I could, I I haven't for me because I guess partly because I already had a setup of like I mentioned,
Hmm.
I have a file for my outline as I go, and a file for characters who show up and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I have a system, and I think if you didn't have a system, you could use Scrivener to like completely contain that, where you have
Hmm.
the writing pages and you have a section that's like research and a section that's characters and what you might hope to do with them or whatever and who they
Yeah.
are and descriptions and things. And so I think it can be good if that's what you need, but right now I haven't found it to be specifically helpful with that.
Hmm.
So yeah, mostly it's notepads in the notepad program and some kind of word clone for me.
Hmm.
I have found that writing things out, like I said, when I was working at gas stations and things like that overnights, and I would write, it takes me just as long to transcribe it
Hmm.
as it would to just write it in the first place. So it doesn't seem like it's advantageous. I suppose it's one of those first draft to second draft kind of things, but
Hmm.
I don't think I found myself changing much in that time. It was just it seemed cumbersome to me
Mm.
to write it out and then try to transcribe it into the program. And I never actually got a chance to really do the dictation thing where you like Dragon Naturally Speaking or whatever, where you basically just talk into the computer and get it to write it for you.
Hmm.
It had crossed my mind, but I never really got into it. And I guess some computers will just do that now. The program itself is superfluous because
Hmm.
you can ask your computer to, hey, type this up. And then, you just talk and it'll transcribe it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think, and then I know that some people that, movement issues or, some other issues definitely would find that feature very useful too.
Oh,
Um,
definitely. It's
but,
great
but,
accessibility tool.
right now I'm just like, and I can type faster than I can talk.
So you have worked with small presses,
Yes,
and have you self published anything, or has it always been with presses?
I think yeah, it's pretty much all been with indie presses, small presses.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, I've published. Like I said, just the one book so far
Hmm.
last year, and this same I'll be publishing with the same company this year, Ascendant Publishing, which I guess is going to Ascendant Media now because they're doing they are doing some movies.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
the main editor came up and we shot some stuff a couple weeks ago in the woods. I have a 300-acre wood. It's not mine, but I can literally walk out my back door and like walk into 3 poos worth of forest. Um, and we went out and we shot some stuff there, and then we have another thing coming out. I'm not sure, probably sometime next year.
Hmm.
But we had shot some initial footage with someone, and then they backed out, so we have to shoot that stuff again because they were supposed to be like one of the main characters, and you
Mm.
know how it goes. Um, but yeah, so we have like that's supposed to probably be. They're all shorts, I think, but like one of them's supposed to be like half an hour, one of them's like a 5 minute thing, kind of thing, and so they've kind of expanded with that.
Hmm.
I have never really gotten into trying to find an agent or
Hmm.
get in with a big publisher. I think I sent my Dyson Sphere uh, novel or the package, the
Hmm.
first few chapters and the synopsis and everything to uh, Penguin. Berkeley Penguin. They had an open period at the beginning of last year. I was like, oh, I'll just send it and see what happens, and
Hmm.
nothing happened. So, you know, publish it through the guy I know, or the publishing company I know. So yeah, pretty much all small publishers so far. Hope
Hmm.
maybe at some point, if I built up enough momentum with the books coming out on a relatively rapid basis, then maybe it's one of the ones that I don't have earmarked for someone might want. And they'll be like, "Hey, I'll give you a pile of money for that." Cool. You know,
What is the most challenging thing for you as a writer?
you know, um, kind of like what I was saying before about momentum.
Mm,
Uh, you know, sitting down initially on any given day. Like if I've been writing regularly every day, it's a lot easier to
mm,
sit down the next day. But like I've just had a break, the winter break. It's been really hard for me to get back into writing my chapter a week
mm,
for my Patreon, and so I guess that inertia and momentum
mm,
is really the big thing. Sitting down and doing it, and knowing that it's hard to get back into it.
mm,
It's a little hard. It's a little easier, I think. In my situation, is I already have the first three books of the series are there. I'm like over halfway through this book, so I can look back over the last couple chapters. It's like, okay, what was happening, and kind of get
mm,
myself back into the flow of the story.
mm,
But people talk all the time about sitting down in front of a blank page and that being you know scary and tough to start. And I think sometimes knowing where to start is probably one of the toughest parts.
mm,
Again, with the series, I kind of have that built in until I get to the next series, and then I figure out where that one starts.
mm,
Um, but yeah, so far as challenges or what makes writing difficult is basically just getting started. Sitting down
mm.
and doing it.
Has that feeling ever made you think, I'm not going to do this again? Or is there always something pushing you to go, okay, no, you have to do something?
A little bit of both. I think I definitely have considered. It's like I'm no good at this. I'm not getting enough traction with sending stories out, or
Mm-hmm,
never gonna win any awards or whatever.
mm-hmm,
But then I look at it, and even when I step away for a little while, I know that again I've been telling myself stories and such
mm-hmm,
since I was like 5 or 6. So it's a lifetime of a habit. And so, if nothing else, it's a tough habit to break, you
mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And so I know that even if I say this sucks, publishing is not for me or whatever,
Mm-hmm,
I will come back because to some degree, what else am I going to do? Uh, you know, sit around and play video games all day. You and I did that. I had a rough time between schools at one point with breakup and some other stuff, and I was
mm-hmm.
like definitely spent a summer playing Diablo 2 or whatever it was,
Good
and
choice.
then and while that was engaging and fun or whatever,
Mm-hmm,
when I got to the end of the summer, I was like, what the hell did I just do? Now I need to do something
mm-hmm,
that means something more than just going to work and coming back and going to work and coming back playing video games.
mm-hmm,
And it's fun, but it is a diversion. And if you have anything else you want to do with your life, you have to make that choice to do that thing. You obviously still watch shows and play games and stuff like that, but
mm-hmm,
in order to for me, I think I need some kind of feeling that I'm making something that will be there after I'm gone. And hopefully,
mm-hmm,
with these stories, putting out books and things, maybe 50 years or 100 years or whatever, someone will find one of my books and say, "Oh, that was pretty cool," and read it. Maybe not like you know Tolkien, where it's 100 years later or 80 years later or whatever, and they're still making movies about whatever, and but at least not be completely forgotten.
Do you think that has that feeling always been with you, or has it been since you've had kids where you've thought, I need to leave a legacy behind?
I think pretty much it's been with me. I mean, I know my general life hasn't been very similar to most people's.
Mm-hmm,
My family stuff and you
mm-hmm,
know all the things that have gone on. Um, and but I don't feel like I have a very good grounding in the world if I'm not doing something to make my own place. It's not
mm-hmm,
like, oh, technically I'm the fourth John McColley in the row, but at the same time, I didn't know the first couple, and even the last one before me. I met when I was 17.
Hmm.
Um, so it wasn't like I have this firm grounding of like family spirit and all this other stuff where I'm part of a group that already and that gives me some sense of purpose.
Hmm.
I don't really have any of that, so I
Hmm.
had to find my own purpose, and the one I found so far is writing and creating stuff.
Has the writing community for you been a form of like family or belonging that you've sort of needed?
I think so. Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, I definitely through various different platforms and modes.
Mm.
Like I've tried to do writing groups in person, and
Mm.
those are always kind of small, and obviously scheduling can be an issue,
Mm.
and those fall apart pretty quick. But the internet is always there. So like Facebook and Twitter and stuff. There's many author groups, and people you get to meet and kind of think of as friends. And
Mm.
I think some of them definitely are, and some of them were like, oh, I know that guy.
Yeah.
And so there's that range of social connection that I wouldn't have if I didn't write.
Mm.
Probably. I mean, I might find other people, to find things in common with, but the act itself of writing is exploratory and you know uh, externally and internally,
Mm.
and so you to meet up with people who are on the same journey so far as that goes definitely gives you a lot of common ground,
Mm.
rather than rooting for the same football team or whatever.
No, I think that's something that's great about creative communities is that it is in some capacity for a large portion of people has an emotional element to it, and then by being emotional or like putting these ideas out there and being in my opinion putting things out there that you've written, regardless of what the subject is a vulnerable position to be in because you're opening yourself up to criticism or people thinking that your ideas are strange or whatever, and you're just welcome, potentially welcoming something negative into your life. So it's like a chance, and if you're all kind of out there being vulnerable in your own way, however form that takes, I think there is, I don't know, a mutual comfort in that. And I think what I've found for the large portion of the community that like to talk to each other and that do interact with one another and lift each other up and all that sort of jazz is that we all just kind of want each other to win all the time, and that's
Yes.
really nice. Obviously, there are people that aren't. I won't talk about them. They don't deserve
Right.
my time or my effort.
Right. Yeah.
But those who like, it's one thing keeping to yourself because you don't particularly need that community element, but to actively be in that and encourage people in whatever form that takes. I think that, I don't know, it's there's something, there's a bit magnetic about it, and it makes me want to try harder, makes me want to get involved more, and I don't know, it's nice having like this group of internet people who have a similar goal, or they all just, we all just want each other to do well. When your work does well, it's a good thing for the whole community. It's not
Yeah.
like, oh, that's going to take away sales or reading time or whatever from my stuff. I don't know. I think it's great, and it's a nice sort of thing to be around, a nice energy to be around, and I can't imagine not having it around anymore. That would
Right.
suck. That would leave such a void.
Yes. Definitely.
Mm. It's definitely motivating. I also find, I don't know if you're the same. I also find that when other people are like succeeding or they're doing stuff or they're like, oh, I had a crap day, but I still wrote 100 words. I just think, oh man, if they can write 100 words, what am I complaining about? Do you know what I mean? Because
Right.
it's not about the quantity. It's not about the number, or I mean, it is for some people, I suppose, but it's quite encouraging as well to watch other people's processes and their journeys and go, oh well, if they're having a crap day and they've managed to do something, maybe it'll help me. And it's, I don't know, mutual support.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
So, with your work, we're recording this really far in advance, but this episode will be coming out in June. And you said that you hope to have something out in the sort of June period. I'm not going to pin down a
Yes.
date just in case because things happen. Um,
Right.
so you've already sort of talked about, is this the one with the amnesia?
That will come out. That one with the amnesia is actually going to probably come out in August
Okay.
ish. But That was one of my Patreon
Mm-hmm.
series, and the other Patreon series is Breaking the Word, which
Mm-hmm.
is about uh, this super powerful wizard basically threatening all of the balance of the world kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing, and these other wizards kind of try to get together and figure out how to stop him from screwing everything up,
Mm-hmm.
and they come up with this idea of um, going to the deepest essence of magic, which in this world arises from the original words of creation,
Mm-hmm.
and basically finding a way to change the word just enough so that it's the words that this other guy knows and is using to cause all this havoc and destruction
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work for him anymore. Basically, they're disarming him to some degree. So that was the plan in the very first. I'm not sure if it's the actual first scene, but the first chapter, basically, he finds a way to basically kill all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But the project is still there, and one of their apprentices picks it up and has a general idea of what to do,
Mm-hmm.
um, and goes and tries to do it, and basically sets off on his big quest to save the world, even though he's just an apprentice, and
Mm-hmm.
meets a number of other interesting characters. There's a exiled dwarven prince. There's the guard captain of a small town who ends up finding out that she's much more,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that she's. I guess that's the connection of forgetting who you are, kind of thing, because
Mm-hmm.
she's been through all this stuff and blocked a lot of things out and just doesn't remember. And then they meet other people
Mm-hmm.
and form a group that goes through all kinds of weird stuff, and I think entertaining and fun weird stuff, but then end up facing off against the enemy at the end of the first book.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, I've written four of those. I'm on the fourth. I'm going to write the fifth book this year,
Mm-hmm.
and so one of the things that people worry about with series is, will they ever finish it? And the answer is yes. Unless I die in the next few months, you will get all five books. Um, because it's not like there's some publisher over there that's like, oh well, this isn't making enough money, so we're not going to put out the last two books or whatever. I have written the first four, and I have it in with a publisher that publish basically.
Uh-huh.
He's more or less told me, whatever you write, I will publish. It's like,
Oh, that's
okay, cool,
nice.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So this is it. This is what we're doing. Um, and so again, I have four books in that series. I have 3 3/4 books of the other series
Mm-hmm.
that are out of both are going to be 5 books. So you can rest fairly assured that you will see or be able to, if you like the first one,
Mm-hmm.
the second one will be available next year, and then the year after, probably one
Mm-hmm.
a year for the next 5 years, and it'll get done because it's mostly already written.
Great.
Don't worry about that.
Excellent. Good PSA for anyone
Right?
considering reading the series. Pretty much all of your stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I've completely misunderstood what's happening. Your work contains a lot of sort of some fantastical elements.
Yes.
Is that something that you feel the most comfortable to write about?
Yes, like one of the things they say is, write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
But part of what that means is, not necessarily a subject, but also the style and the genre and
Mm-hmm.
things. So if I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, which I did,
Mm-hmm.
through junior high and high school and college, I read dozens and dozens, hundreds even of books. I started off with like Dracula and Frankenstein,
Mm-hmm.
the not kids condensed editions, so
Mm-hmm.
I was exposed to like the full range of the language and everything, um, and I just kept on reading and that's Ray Bradbury and even Stephen King to some degree. Like usually I read, there's like Stephen's got like two main branches, like psychos
Mm-hmm.
and weird magic-y stuff, and like and I usually stay away from the psychos. Although the first one I read was Misery.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it was like Eyes of the Dragon, Dark Tower,
Mm-hmm.
all those things. And I've definitely always been drawn to stuff that couldn't necessarily happen in the world as we know it,
Mm-hmm.
on a day-to-day basis. And some of it's far future sci-fi stuff, robots and shape-shifting via nanotechnology or stuff like that,
Mhm.
or uh, magic of various types. I've actually come up with a few different magic systems and things. And in fact, one of the things is I came up with the idea of creating one world after the next, not just like, oh, I have Somnron, and but like that world ends, like there's like a actual end of the world apocalyptic situation, and then I created the next world, which incorporates stuff from the previous world. Some things survive in some form or other from one world into the next world,
Mhm.
which is actually part of the theme of the Weight of Darkness, which was my first book for last year,
Mhm.
was part of the or most of the actual conflict that happens. It comes from the fact that there's this being that was in this previous universe, and then when everything ended and got remixed into like the Big Bang and like energy came out and all this other stuff, basically managed to survive that until there was matter, and then but then their essence got mixed into everything. So
Mhm.
basically, every planet out there has a little bit of this creature in it, and it becomes gradually more conscious.
You're definitely a writer. It's in your bones.
Yeah, at this point, definitely. Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show
Oh,
today. I really appreciate you
for me too.
telling me
Thank you.
about your creativity and your processes and how you work. It's always fascinating to me to actually speak to the writers.
Everyone has their own path and their own way of
Hmm.
getting their ideas out,
Hmm.
and different influences, like different genres and stuff like that. Like you asked about, if everything has a weird or fantastical element to it, I tend to, yeah,
Hmm.
Whereas a lot of people are like, you know, everyone has to have like a relationship kind of thing. There's always has to be some romance, or
Ugh.
there isn't any in most of my stuff.
Yeah.
There's a couple people who have like relationships, but it never goes into the romance
Hmm.
range. But it's also not like part of the main story or anything.
Hmm.
I tried to write a fantasy romance once back in the day, and I got like 15,000 words into it. But
I can't write
yeah,
romance stuff. It just
yeah,
doesn't interest me
right.
at all. I'm like, no, give me some violence. That's what interests me.
Let me see the blood.
Freak me out. That's what I want to know. I don't care if they love each other. Oh, good. But no, thank you so much again for being here today. Before I let you leave, where can the listeners find you and your work?
Oh, geez. As I said a number of times, I'm on Patreon.
Hmm.
Just search for John A. McColley, and
Hmm.
it should find it pretty quick. As you mentioned, I have a number of things up at various places. Amazon is a pretty good clearinghouse.
Hmm.
Everything ends up there. Um, those are probably the big two places. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and
Hmm.
and Blue Sky. So if you want to reach out or make contact, I'm there as well. But so far as finding stuff to read, yeah, my Patreon, and I have a bunch of during the pandemic, I put up a bunch of short stories for free, so you don't even have to necessarily sign up and give me money to get a sample of what I've written.
I'll also put the links for those in the description of the episode as well.
Oh, awesome!
And a lot of the links for your work are also on your author feature on Indiosyncrasy, so I'll put the link for that
Yes,
in the description of the episode as
that
well. But
sounds
yeah,
great.
thank you again, and hopefully we can revisit this at some point and we'll see what other 1,000 things you've published since then.
Might have. Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Catch you soon.